Duncan Williams is with the Construction Association of Nova Scotia, where they're, of course, watching the tariff talk very closely. Mr. Williams, how much do you know about how tariffs will hurt construction in this province?
Well, Tom, thanks for the question. Thanks for having us. We really see, two edges of this sword. Number one is the impact that it will have on our exporters and members that we have that are building in the U.S. and exporting prefabricated materials. That is certainly a smaller piece, but nonetheless still very, very important part of our economy. The other part is the countermeasures from the federal level and what is actually going to be subjected to tariffs from the Canadian side, which will, of course, impact the price of goods and materials used in construction in Nova Scotia and across the country.
Okay, I want to ask you more about that in just a moment, but perhaps you could ballpark this, but how much of a commercial building, or a house for that matter, built in Nova Scotia actually comes from the United States?
We're still trying to figure out exactly what that composition looks like. As you can imagine, every project is different. But we would estimate that between 40 and 60% of materials used are imported from elsewhere around the globe. And a big portion of that is coming from the US, probably in the neighborhood of 40 to 50%.
And so how much can contractors eat that, or how much of that gets passed along to consumers in terms of building prices or housing prices?
Yeah, I'd love to say that, contractors can eat those costs, but it's just not realistic. Most contractors deal with very, very small margins as it is. So unfortunately, most of this cost will have a direct impact on the buyer of construction, whether it's the renter or the retail outlet or a commercial property or infrastructure for that matter. Those are going to be costs that are going to be directly passed on to the end buyer of construction.
There's so much uncertainty, some would say chaos. I'm wondering what impact all of that has on construction projects that may be waiting in the wings, developers or contractors who were trying to decide whether to take on that next project or not.
Yeah, I think chaos was probably a kind word for it. Madness is probably closer to what the reality is. We don't have any predictability. And of course, the current administration of the US is changing its requirements and terms on a day-to-day basis, and frankly, probably on an hour-by-hour basis right now. So just as we think we're starting to turn a corner and reach, some conclusion, the rules of the game continue to change. And that's, a direct result of President Trump.
I know you're not strictly in the lumber business, but if there's less lumber going to the United States, for example, does that mean that some of the prices, for example, lumber, that go into the construction price of a building, will they actually come down in this country rather?
I doubt it. Generally, if you're into the commercial lumber production, it's a numbers game, and that means it's volume, right? So if one of your major customers decides that they are not going to purchase, or they're going to change the rules of engagement, the industries are going to adapt as fast as they can. But ultimately, if your actual product is dependent upon pricing, sorry, and your volume goes down, you still have to cover your overhead costs. Even with some belt tightening, you're probably not going to see prices come down. In fact, I would still say they would likely go up again.
In fact, some lumber mills are suggesting they might even shut down for a short period of time if it gets really bad. So there's that as well, I suppose. You had mentioned the retaliatory tariffs by Canada as a possible approach by government. How concerning is that for your industry?
That, from a contractor point of view, builder point of view, that's probably the most intrusive when it comes to the industry being able to respond to housing needs, multi-residential housing, commercial, industrial. Those prices on products that are coming into the country increasing by 25%. You're going to see second guessing of budgets. You're going to see projects delayed. You will see projects canceled because they simply are going to be priced at a point where the market just can't bear them. Or a provincial budget in some cases may be just completely put out of whack with what would be normal. and it's no longer affordable to do 5 projects, and maybe it's now affordable to do 3. So there will be a very real and direct impact, and it will be pretty quick. And probably long lasting. And, it's because we have such an integrated approach, and a lot of our trade is north south. So one of the big factors for us is how do we move along the conversation to reducing barriers from interprovincial trade, maximizing the opportunities for Canadian companies to provide domestic supply. So it's a scramble right now to really try and understand who has capacity and how quickly can we mobilize them to respond. In addition to that, how do we identify other suppliers and other marketplaces for our goods, and likewise where we can import them from.
Yeah, it's a complicated picture to say the least. Thank you so much for your time on this. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, Tom.